You are listening to the Overcome Pornography for Good podcast, episode 205, Chronic Shame and Fear of Accountability. Welcome to the Overcome Pornography for Good podcast, where we take a research-based, trauma-informed, and results-focused approach to quitting porn. This approach has been revolutionary and changed thousands and thousands of lives. I'm your host, Sarah Brewer. Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast episode. I just want to dive right in. I watched this great clip from a content creator. Their name was Dana Dozy, and it was really short. And the line that caught my eye said, "Chronic shame can make it really scary to be held accountable." I don't know, that one just hit me, and I was like, there's a lot to be said about that. And I want to talk about that and, bring up shame again. Let's talk shame some more. That's one of my favorite things to talk about. Apparently, I love to talk about shame. I love diving into it. I love diving deep into shame, figuring it out, kind of seeing what creates it. One of my favorite things, and I think one of the most important things to do, is to show people how shame affects their life and point out little ways that it's doing it subtly that you might not be aware of. There's a lot of little subtle things that we do to shame our emotions or shame ourselves. And typically we do it in the name of love or in the name of, oh, but I really care about myself. And so here, let me think of an example. One example is anger. If we feel intense anger, we think, oh, we've got to heal that anger so we can get back to love. And what that really actually does is it shames the anger. And anger does not like to be shamed. It kind of pushes shame to the back burner, thinks of anger as less than. And what that does, it actually creates problems. First of all, when we shame anger, what happens? Well, it makes the anger more angry. And it's like, no, listen to me. We also start to, if we shame anger, we start to not listen to these parts of us that are actually really important and might have some wisdom for us. And so that's a whole different topic that I'm, going off on. It's not even the point of today's episode, but I'll just mention, sometimes people think that we should shame anger because if we don't, then anger is just going to rule our life and we're going to destroy things and we're going to yell and we're screaming and we're going to act out of a lot of anger and let anger be our driving force and our driving emotion. Instead, what we want to do is learn to unshame anger and integrate it and love it and learn from it, listen to it, learn from it. And here's the thing, right? Anger can be movement and can be good movement. See this easily on TV shows. I'm thinking maybe where there's a big battle and what finally causes the people to move and what finally causes the people to stand up for themselves is a surge of anger. And we got to be careful, right? Because if anger is just, becomes the underlying surge of everything we do, we can end up destroying a lot of things. But if we just shame anger and push anger away and tell ourselves that anger shouldn't be there, it's kind of the same principle as the beach ball, right? We push down emotion. What does it do? It just pops up. It wants to explode. When you hold a beach ball underwater, what does it do? It pops up, wants to explode. Anyways, okay, so let's get into chronic shame and accountability. And the sentence, chronic shame can make it really scary to feel accountable. Chronic shame can make it really scary to be held accountable. This is because so many of us have learned to use shame as your source of motivation in order to hold yourself accountable. So my motivation for being a good person is so I don't feel shame, would be an example of that. Or if I don't accomplish X, Y, or Z, then I am not good enough. Therefore, I feel shame. And so because, right, shame is such an icky emotion and we don't want to feel it, it can feel really motivating to avoid shame. And so some of us learn early on to use shame as a motivator to change, shame as a motivator to make different life choices, or shame as a motivator to accomplish things. If I don't run this half marathon, I'm not proving to myself that I can do hard things. Therefore, shame. So I think a lot of us have been taught to do that. Now, if we use shame to motivate us, it really hurts in the long term. And this is because shame can kind of jack up your nervous system. So when I say nervous system, I am talking about how your emotions respond in your body and what happens in your body when you feel certain emotion. Now, right, emotion is not just something we feel in our head. Emotion is something that we feel all over our nervous system, our body. I want y'all to think about, what does shame do for your individual nervous system? Now, when I think about feeling shame, oh, like my body wants to freeze. It's such a freeze response. Shame is such a freeze response for me. And I wonder how many of you, if it's the same for you, or if maybe shame feels like fight, maybe shame feels like flight or just hiding. It's a big one too. Or if shame might feel like freeze, maybe it feels like many of those. But I am totally a freezer. My body gets really distressed when it feels especially chronic shame. Now, there's a difference between chronic shame and just normal shame that you experience every now and then as a human. We need to be careful that we don't, again, like shame, or demonize shame, because we all feel shame. And I've said this multiple times on the podcast, but I think it's Brene Brown who says, only sociopaths don't feel shame. And so thank you, shame. I feel shame every now and then. That means I'm human. Now, that's different than chronic shame. And I used to live from chronic shame, and I know what that feels like. I was thinking this the other day. It just kind of hit me like, wow, shame is kind of a rare occurrence for me now. And how beautiful is that? Like, do I remember when it was every single day? I was like chronically feeling shame every single day, and I don't anymore. And how amazing. And I was thinking about that because in terms of anxiety, like I've been doing lots of work on my kind of chronic anxiety. And I was thinking about, what would it be like to not have anxiety in my life very often, like every single day? What if it was also kind of a uncommon occurrence like shame has become? And thinking about how I was able to, and like have had this transformation with shame where it's not in part of my everyday life, it's just kind of a random thing. It gives me a lot of hope that that can also happen with anxiety. And it's honestly, it's gotten so much better over the last couple of years. And it's just really beautiful to kind of look back and think about how, we're able to heal, and our brains really are malleable, and we aren't stuck in anything. So many of us, I keep going on little tangents, but here's another little one. Like, your shame is not your fault. Your shame stories are not your fault. Your anxieties are not your fault. So many of these things that maybe like our nervous systems when we were kids, we picked up on, or things that we were taught when we were young that were just given to us, it's not our fault. It's not your fault. And hallelujah that we can heal it now that we're adults, now that we have access to so many healing things, and people are even talking about it now. And there's therapy, and there's coaching, and there's medication, and there's, all of these amazing modalities that can help you heal. Psychedelics, right? The amazing studies going on around, different psychedelics that are just healing people with PTSD like they've never seen before. It's amazing. We really can heal. We really can heal. So back to shame and your nervous system, and how chronic shame is really what we want to be avoiding. I don't even like that term, avoiding. Chronic shame is what we want to look at as something to work through, not just, feeling shame occasionally as a human who experiences shame, but like chronic shame is something that can really hurt us in the long term. When we talked about how I freeze, thinking about your own body and how your own nervous system responds to shame, and thinking about, if we are to take seriously our bodies and our nervous systems, and really take seriously when it's telling us that there's a problem. So many of us are used to, I'm like feeling tight and icky in my body, and I'm just ignoring it. And it's not even that you're intentionally ignoring it. It's just that we aren't taught to pay attention to how our body feels. And it's like discomfort is just a given. And if you're feeling freezy, if you're feeling anxious, it's just a given. That's just life. What if it wasn't? What if we could all stop and slow down, pay attention to our bodies? What is it feeling? Is it feeling tight? Is it feeling stressed? Is it feeling distressed at all? And can, instead of, ignoring it, can we look at that as a signal or a sign, as something that we might need to shift around? But, many of us aren't taught to do that. And we have to learn to do that now that we're listening to podcasts that talk about it, or we start going to therapy and we start learning about it. And not even, all therapists or everyone who goes to therapy, they're not even all of them are talking about your body and your nervous system and somatic healing things, talking to one of my siblings, and they've been doing therapy forever. And I was talking to him and I said, I think you need someone who can like help you work through some of your body stuff, like the trauma responses coming up. And they were like, yeah, I've never worked on that in therapy. I'm like, what? Some therapists, they just really are focused on the brain, and it's beautiful and amazing. And like the thought processes and the CBT stuff, we can't just look at just our thoughts. And this was something I learned so strong, like within the last 2-3 years. And now I've done so many trainings and certifications around this. You can't just look at your thoughts. You have to like incorporate your body and your nervous system here. That's why we need to look at shame. When your body is feeling and in distress, that affects you. That affects you. Even if you want to pretend that it doesn't affect you, it does. It affects your energy, it affects your health, and it affects your relationships. So, back to our topic around being accountable, being held accountable, or even having accountability for yourself and chronic shame. If you are used to using shame as your motivator, being held accountable can feel very distressing. And so, what that might look like is maybe you even hear the word accountability and you feel shame. Or what that can look like is shutting down when your partner shares their feelings with you. Maybe your partner is sharing how they feel hurt and you shut down because of shame. Maybe your partner is asking you about something that they asked you to do, or asking you about something that you were talking about doing, and you shut down because you feel shame around that. Like accountability aspect is coming up and you feel shame and you shut down. Or you shut down when you slip up, when you don't follow through with yourself. Maybe you slip up or you don't keep a promise to yourself. Maybe you shut down. This is that all or nothing mindset. Boy, can we link all or nothing mindsets back to shame. This can be a hard dynamic for your partner in your relationship. It's not making things better. It's you shutting down when you feel shame. When hard stuff is brought up, it's going to make things worse. This is something common. My partner, whenever I'm bringing up something that I want to talk through or work on, they just shut down, and I feel guilty because now they feel really terrible. It's a hard thing to work through. So if you find yourself doing that, instead of jumping into a lot of shame around it, I want us just to be curious. Let's just start to be curious and start to notice if those are some of the patterns that we've been given. This can look like maybe your partner is asking you to contribute more to the housework or something, and you immediately jump into, well, I'm just not good enough. You immediately jump into, I'm never enough. And we really, really want to try to shift that. Okay, so instead of that, let's talk about what we can do instead, what we can shift that shame into instead, this chronic shame into, this fear of being held accountable, or even this fear of conflict that arises. And these are inner fixes, okay? They're not outer fixes. The fix is not, if you feel a little of this like anxiety around accountability because of shame, the fix is not to do everything perfectly and to always keep all of your promises to yourself, right? That's not the fix. And so many people, when they learn about this or they hear about this, we want to pretend that the fixes are external, that if we just show up better, it gets fixed. And that's not true. That's not true. We have to do these inner fixes. And so one fix that we can do here is shifting our mindset around mistakes. And instead of mistakes being, if I make a mistake, I am bad or I'm not good enough, it's shifting into a growth mindset, which is we're here as humans and yeah, we're messy. And yeah, we make mistakes. And the purpose is not to not make mistakes. The purpose is to just grow and to learn and to be curious with our mistakes and love them and learn from them. Man, can you imagine how different life would be if we were not raised with this mentality that we should not make mistakes? Because think about how that is just drilled into you from when you're a tiny kid at church, at school, right? You're not allowed to make mistakes at school. Oh, what if instead of, mistakes are bad, mistakes just are. They're part of the experience. And so what we can do then is we can focus on solutions, growth solutions, instead of blame. When mistakes are bad, we have to find someone to blame for them. When mistakes are bad, we have to find some way to either like explain them or justify them or blame for them. And neither of those are going to get us the result we want, right? If you view porn and this feels like a mistake to you, going straight into blame is going to go into that shame spiral. Or going straight into justifications is going to keep you in a pattern of doing something that, you don't feel control around. It's going to keep you feeling out of control. So, shifting our mindset around mistakes into a growth mindset. The second thing we can do is separate our actions from identity. And oh boy, right? This is a whole podcast episode in itself. How do we separate our actions from our identity? But what I have found really helpful here are my spiritual practices. And y'all have heard me talk about this before, but really taking a look at your spiritual practices and making sure that they're serving you and helping you. Because often some spiritual practices, if they're just, off a little bit, they can create more shame. And so, is for me, that spiritual practice, I feel it a lot in meditation, is understanding that my identity is separate from my actions. And there's this part of me that is Sarah and takes actions and tries things and makes mistakes and yells at her husband occasionally and, is not perfect. And then there's like my true essence, which is, deep and spiritual and bigger than just Sarah, right? So that's been really helpful for me. Other ways you can start to separate your actions from identity is just, again, recognizing that you are not your thoughts and you are not what you do. You just are, you just exist. And then thoughts and what you do are part of the experience of you existing, but it is not you. It is just the experience of you existing. Okay, the third thing we can do is shift judgment to curiosity. Now, when we're really stuck in judgment, I'm thinking about me at the beginning of my journey, working through all my shame. You can't just go from shame to love, from, wow, I feel so much shame to, wow, I love myself so much. That's impossible. But what we can do is we can make little shifts. So like a shift from judgment to curiosity. So even just like for a moment, if you can just shift into curiosity instead of judgment. So, wow, like there goes my brain feeling really terrible. Why? Why does it feel so terrible? Why is it saying these things about myself? Where did I learn this? Or, I wonder why I did that. What do you think was going on there when I did that? So seriously, if that is like one takeaway that many of you can start doing is when you view porn, instead of judging yourself for it, shifting into, why did I do that? So many of us don't even go there. So many of you were not even taught to go there when it comes to porn. You were taught, when you view porn, you got to stop it. You got to figure out a way to not do that again. And we're taught shame, right? When you view porn, you should feel bad because that was a bad thing to do. Instead, why? What was I feeling? What created that action for me? What was going on in my day that, led me to go and do this, right? So that's really helpful. Number 4, journaling, such a powerful, powerful tool. It's always the simple tools that are the most powerful. Going on a walk, journaling, and sleeping, right? Those things can solve just about anything. But journaling, such a simple thing. Journal about the shame. Write a letter to the shame. Write a letter from shame to you. Write a letter to shame from the perspective of love. Just getting it all out on paper and then looking at it with curiosity is a huge one. And then lastly, the last thing that we can start to do, some of these inner fixes, is learn how to love shame. Learn how to love shame. Shame is there for a reason. It's not just this bad thing inside of you. Shame has a role and a purpose. And even if it's not helping you, it's trying to help you. And so one thing you can say to your shame is, thank you, shame, for protecting me. Thank you, shame, for keeping me alive. I see you. I see what you're trying to do for me. And that part makes me a little bit emotional because all of these parts of us, every single freaking part of us, shame, anger, jealousy, stress, depression, every part of us, when you get to the root of it, is love. And it's just trying to love you and help you. Shame's trying to protect the goodness that it knows exists inside of you. shame might have been what you were taught in order to fit in or to stay alive or to stay a part of the tribe. And so as we love shame, that's when we heal it. We don't heal shame by hating it and pushing it away. We heal it through loving it. And another powerful thing you can do, and this is even a great journal prompt, is shame, thank you, I love you. And now I'd like to give you a new role. I'd like to give you a new assignment. I'm thinking about the movie Inside Out 2 specifically. I love that movie, y'all. If you haven't gone and watched that, you got to go watch that. You're going to love it. But in Inside Out 2, the last scene, it's this whole story of like anxiety, right? And how anxiety ends up controlling the whole motherboard of this girl's life. And then, they work through this stuff. And at the end, it's like this come together scene at the end. And all these emotions are working together. And anxiety, instead of being at front and center and making all the decisions, it's sitting a little bit further back, but she's still helpful. She's still helping the team help this cute girl, have the best life she can. And so anxiety's role shifted out of worrying about every possible case scenario. And in this last scene, anxiety is just reminding people, oh, hey, remember, we have an important assignment due tomorrow. And also remember, we want to get this done before we go out and play hockey or whatever. I can't remember exactly what it is, but anxiety is taking on a new role there where instead of being, really anxious, it's just helping them remember what they need to do and thinking about outcomes so that they can make the best decision for the best outcome they want. So how can we give shame a new role? What new roles can we give shame? Some ideas might be letting shame just simply be a signal for misalignment. I have a great podcast episode on this where I talk about guilt versus shame. But the important part here, if it's going to be a signal for misalignment, we've got to release it. So we've got it when it tells us that something might not be aligning. We look at that, right? So you view porn and then you feel a little shame. Oh, thank you, shame, for just showing me that didn't really line up with my value system. You can go now. You're released. Thank you. You can go. So a key there is you have to let it go instead of pulling shame up to the forefront to start driving your actions. So that's a new role. It can be a signal for misalignment. It can also just be a great signal for where can I embrace more self-compassion? Shame, your new role is showing me where I can practice more compassion for myself. That one's so good. Or, even just connecting and understanding the human experience. Shame, can your new role please be to show me how I can connect with this experience of being human? Because, guarantee you're not the only one who feels shame and who feels self-hatred and feels bad about yourself. And so instead of, you driving me and being the energy for me to change, I just want you to help me connect and understand human emotion. And I also want you to help me see where I can embrace more self-compassion. Those are some ideas. I'm sure there's a lot of other roles that we can give shame. All right, you guys, thank you so much for being here, listening in today. I love you all. I wish you a very Merry Christmas and a happy holidays. And we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye. I want to invite you to come and listen to my free class, How to Overcome Pornography for Good Without Using Willpower. We talk about how to stop giving into urges without pure willpower or relying on phone filters so that you can actually stop wanting pornography. We talk about how to stop giving up after a few weeks or months. And spoiler alert, the answer isn't have more willpower. And then lastly, we talk about how to make a life without porn easily sustainable and permanent. If you're trying to quit porn, this class is a game changer. So you can go and sign up at sarahbrewer.com/masterclass, and it is totally free.